Now, at least 3 people have been killed and 8 others wounded in a Russian missile strike on the east-central Ukrainian city of Dnipro. The local governor says emergency crews are on the scene, working to put out fires and search the rubble for anyone who may still be trapped. Local authorities report that residential areas were hit and the number of casualties could rise as assessments continue. The attack is the latest in a wave of strikes targeting cities across Ukraine. And now in the latest, 3 killed in missile strikes on Dnipro. I request Gilbert Doctor to join us back now. Gilbert, of course, the shellings and the strikes will continue until a settlement is agreed upon. What's your comment? Why now Dnipro?
Well, first of all, Dnipro is not just one of these many little towns that come up in the daily news where the Russians have struck this or that military asset or energy infrastructure. Dnipro is one of the most important cities in Ukraine. It is known in Russian as Dnipropetrovsk. It became Dnipro after the Ukrainian state left the Soviet Union. But Dnipro is also the home to Kolomoisky, who is now in prison, but was one of the biggest financiers of the Azov battalion and of the other nationalist extremists at the start of this war. It is therefore emblematic that the Russians will be paying close attention to Dnipropetrovsk and look to limit Ukrainian hold on the city and on the region.
Sure. In fact, there's some news now of Russian forces also taking control of Klyanov. Let's tell you viewers now, according to Russian media, the Russian Defense Ministry has announced that its troops have taken control of Klyanov. In the Donetsk region, Denis Pushilin said that Russian units are moving block by block in the city of Dnipro, establishing what he described as full control in several neighborhoods. The ministry also reported ongoing operations in the nearby city of Krasnoyarsk, where forces are advancing in the eastern districts and clearing surrounding areas, while assault units push through regions in Dnipro. According to Global Conflict Tracker, Moscow now controls roughly 20% of Ukraine. Russian forces hold almost all of Luhansk, Donetsk, and parts of Zaporizhia and Kherson. Over the past year, Russian troops have pushed forward around Pokrovsk in Donetsk, tightened pressure near Kupiansk, and expanded further control along key front lines in both Donbass and the southeast. I want to take a comment here from Mr. Doctor, who kindly continues to stay with us. Gilbert, of course, now we know that from 19, it's about 20% of territory that's under Russian control, territory of Ukraine. Now, in the peace plan itself, there are provisions for certain areas, including Donbass, to be part of Russian territory. How do you see Russia's movement forward into more and more areas, with it now claiming control of Klyanov itself? Or what do you think Ukraine will have to say on this?
Well, for the audience, it's very difficult to appreciate what is happening on the battlefield and why 3.5 years have gone by with no perceptible increase in the Russian territorial hold or possession in Ukraine. To go from 19% to 20% doesn't sound like much, and I still believe that 20% is grossly underestimating the amount of territory the Russians hold. But the main point has been not territory, but the nature of the territory. The easternmost part of Donetsk Oblast was heavily fortified for 8 years, making it a kind of modern-day Maginot Line, the big French defense line that didn't work because it was outrun. There's no way to outrun or outmaneuver the Ukrainian hold on eastern Donetsk province, and the Russians had to fight their way through it in the most difficult conditions because they couldn't just bomb it to pieces, since it had largely civilian populations of Russian speakers, and they weren't about to massacre their own people. Therefore, it has been a long and complicated fight to take control of all of these fortified cities and trenches and bunkers that were built over 8 years with a lot of NATO supervision and help. The Russians have just about done that. And we're seeing the last efforts of Ukrainian remaining fortified places, like this Krasnoarmeysk, Pokrovsk, it's called in Ukrainian, where the fighting still goes on. That is the last major holdout of the Ukrainians in the Donbass. And once that is captured, and the move continues westward, as it is incrementally day by day, we will see a very fast sweep to the Dnipro River, which is why Mr. Trump said what he said on the Air Force One a couple of days ago, that the Russians will take the whole of Donbass in a matter of weeks or a few months. So it is time for Ukraine to acknowledge that and to avoid further slaughter of its soldiers.
All right, thanks for your comment, Mr. Doctor, and joining us here at NewsX World. With that, viewers, let's move on to news from the United Kingdom, where British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is set to defend his government's budget today, as pressure mounts over accusations that Finance Minister Rachel Reeves misled the public. Reeves raised taxes by £26 billion in last week's budget, insisting she needed a stronger fiscal buffer, despite new forecasts showing the public finances were healthier than expected. She denies any wrongdoing. In a speech in London, Starmer will argue the budget puts Britain back on a stable economic path, noting that borrowing costs have already begun to fall. He's also expected to lay out plans to streamline regulation and push more young people off welfare and into work after an earlier welfare reform attempt sparked a rebellion within his own party. Despite Labour's landslide win last year, Starmer faces growing pressure as polls now show Reform UK edging ahead. And Sham Batra, who is a British politician, joins us live from London.
Hello there, hi.
Hello, sir. Thanks for joining us once again. Now, yesterday we had a very detailed discussion about the budget that Reeves had presented and also about how Starmer was going to defend it. Now, today is that day. You said you were there in the Parliament when Reeves were presenting her budget.
Yeah.
And first of all, how do you react to the developments?
Well, obviously, as of yesterday and a few days before, people are very disgruntled and angry because they were, as when they first came into government, they kept saying that we were left a £22 billion black hole. Well, nobody gave us any evidence to prove that that £22 billion black hole existed. If it didn't exist, or rather, if it did exist, then how in the world would they have given Ukraine so much money to start with when they first came into power? It's unthinkable that with having this type of money could have helped our communities, brought down the taxes maybe. I mean, as I was thinking yesterday, it would have been a great idea if Rachel Reeves had actually said, you know what, we're going to freeze the tax for 6 months. We're going to do stop the taxes that we normally have for a period of time, the VAT, for example. But how can they move from one plank to another and then start saying, oh, well, we've just found that we've got 34 billion in the bank account, say, or more, shall we say. It is unfair of Starmer and his team to mislead the public, first of all. The public are extremely angry at the lies that have been told. I can't even say anything better than the word lie, because it is distorting the truth, that what they have done. But Starmer is now saying that he wants to create growth missions and reforms. First of all, I think that this country should have a referendum regarding paying money to Ukraine when our country is in a dire position. We have people on the streets, we have prices in the shops going up. We have Christmas looming around the corner. This is the first time in my life, in all the years, I've hardly seen Christmas being shown with lights and stuff like that. Even in our towns, the councils are saying, oh, we can't afford to put Christmas lights. You'll have to do it all yourselves. I've never heard of such a thing. Yet we've got a surplus of money hanging around, which we always had. But he's now saying that he wants to create the growth missions. For example, he wants to remove what he says unnecessary regulation to reduce costs across the economy, aimed at lowering costs of living and making markets more dynamic. Now, that one paragraph alone, they haven't made any attempt to help any of our public. A lot of people are on the breadline. There is a lot going on at the moment, I'm afraid. And the fact that is happening, how are they going to start expanding across and saying that they would help apprenticeships, training, support, employment, people with disabilities, neurodivergence and mental health challenges, who he says has been written off a lot of the time. And reforming the welfare and regulatory systems are part of a broader mission that they keep saying. But we haven't seen any long-term growth, 0.1% since they came in. It's not like a surplus of growth this year. That I don't know where we are heading. I can see in the midst, and I don't want to say it, a recession hanging around the corner. But they have to start improving our structure, our infrastructure, the roads in our country. We've got broken holes everywhere. People are buying new cars, they're having their wheels broken. You try claiming from the council, you can't get the money for months on end, yet they'll take it in a second from you when it comes to council tax and other things.
All right, thanks for speaking to us, Mr. Batra. But even as we speak, Starmer is addressing the public there, and he's defending Rachel Reeves, saying they did not mislead the public. Let's watch, viewers.
Being told that the OBR productivity review means you've got £16 billion less than you would otherwise have had, shows that you've got an easy starting point. Yes, of course, all the other figures have to be taken into account, but we started the process with significantly less than we would otherwise have had. That productivity review, or review like that, hasn't been done, I think, for 15 years. This is not an annual exercise. It's an exercise that was done this year. I'm not sure why it wasn't done at the end of the last government, if I'm honest about it, because that would have seemed to me a sensible time to have done it. But it was done. The net result was £16 billion less than you would otherwise have got. That meant, if we measured against our objectives, which is protecting public services, doing what we could on the headroom, which I really wanted to do this time for reasons that are well understood in terms of the stability that it gives. I wanted to more than double the headroom, and to bear down on the cost of living, because I know that for families and communities across the country, that is the single most important issue. Wanted to achieve all those things, starting that exercise with £16 billion less than we might otherwise have had. Of course, there are other figures in this, but there's no pretending that that's a good starting point for a government. It isn't. And there's no to suggest that a government that is saying that's not a good starting point is misleading. It is wrong, in my view. As I say, there was a point at which we did think we would have to breach the manifesto in order to achieve what we wanted to achieve. Later on, it became possible to do it without the manifesto breach. Given the choice between the two, I didn't want to breach the manifesto, and that's why we came to the decisions that we did. On the question about welfare, look, I do think that this is a moral mission. I don't think we can simply leave the best part of 1 million young people not earning or learning and walk past it. I mean, just as I fundamentally believe we've got to lift children out of poverty, that is a moral and personal mission for me, always has been. So too, I feel very strongly about the 1 million young people who we've got a cohort going through who, unless we intervene and do something, could well spend the rest of their lives in that kind of dependency. And I think that's wrong in principle, and that's why I want to deal with it. Thank you, Beth. ITV, Robert Peston.
Hello, Prime Minister. For my sins, I've reported.
All right, let's go back to Sham Batra, who continues to stay with us. Sham, I hope you were able to hear Starmer giving that address. What's your comment? He says that we didn't mislead anybody over the budget. He's in fact also gone on to say that Britain is now back on track.
I don't think so. I mean, if Britain is back on track, why is there no growth? We've got no expansion in business. When they first came in, their manifesto clearly pledged that they would not increase any type of taxes. And Sunak clearly said they are going to increase taxes the moment they get in. The first budget will make them do it. Now, Rachel Reeves last year did do that. We have a very slow growth economy. People are paying at the higher level of 40% tax, plus national insurance, which makes it 55%. Who are the people working for? The state or for themselves or for employers? It doesn't make sense that what he's saying, he's now backtracking, he's backpedaling, basically, because they said that they were going to freeze taxes, the word freeze, but they haven't done anything. I mean, for example, people in London that have businesses, owning properties, running a business from those London properties, they are paying rates through the roof. I mean, a property in Harley Street, doctors' property are doing. They're not doing great business, I'm afraid. I think there was a like there. They're not doing great business, and the situation is that because of the rates, the people are paying almost £12,000 a month just for rates. What does the word rates mean? It's another tax. They could do without that because they can't even give higher incomes to people. London got 50%, or UK got a 50% tax increase, a threshold increase for minimum wage. We are the lowest country in the world for people coming here to work on a minimum wage, £12 something. It's not.
Yeah, and that's a very telling remark in itself, given that it's also one of the most expensive cities to live in. But for now, thank you for joining us, Mr. Sham Batra here at NewsX World. And viewers, we now move on before we wrap up this bulletin. There's some news coming in from France. The Élysée Palace has said in a statement that French President Emmanuel Macron will visit China this week and meet Chinese President Xi Jinping. The 3-day visit is scheduled to begin on December 3 with 2 stops in Beijing and Chengdu. Now, the state visit comes as Europe scrambles to respond to the Ukraine peace plan proposed by US President Donald Trump, as well as amid mounting trade tensions between China and Europe. According to the Élysée Palace, France has expressed its wish for China to persuade Russia to abide by UN principles as a permanent member of the Security Council. And that's all the time